gathered in the upper room, just waiting for the spark. A flame that shook the shadows, it lit up every heart. Each tongue began to sing aloud, no borders held them down. A story forged in courage from the cities to the towns. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. The chains were breaking open, the blind began to see. Prison walls crumbled down, they walked out free. With love as their banner, they turned the world around. A revolution started with echoes of the sound. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. They carried light through all the lands, through storms and trials with steady hands. From the streets to every soul, the mission clear, the gospel whole. Now here we stand in modern days, their mission still alive. The echoes of their bravery in every heart survive. So let's be bold and take our place. The time to act is near. The message moves eternally. It's loud and crystal clear. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. Rise up, stand tall, don't look away. Love's the anthem, they can't decay. Chains will break as truth shines through. Jesus gave his name to me, and yeah, you. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is DJ, and this one is named Thor. The mighty Thor. who loves snuggles and really just wanted to be with Daddy for a while today. So we'll see how long this lasts. But welcome. All right, this month we're doing the Book of Acts in the Amplified Edition of the Bible, and I just realized I don't actually have it on the screen, so let's just fix that right now, shall we? Let's do that. There we go. So, yeah, gonna be continuing the fun today. This one is just adorable. I just can't help myself. Just so much snuggles. All right, choosing of the seven, chapter 6. Now, about this time, when the number of disciples was increasing, a complaint was made against the Hellenists, or Jewish, or Greek-speaking Jews. Those are our footnotes here. Hi, is that a microphone? It sure is. All right. Jews who were born outside the Holy Land who speak or spoke the Greek language and had adopted much of Greek culture. Now, that's actually a really good footnote, that there is a lot of the Greek culture that they had adopted. Hi. And that's really important. It's going to be one of those days, folks. Um, so there is made against these folks, my bad, by these folks against the native Hebrews, or again, native born to that and spoke Hebrew and lived according to Jewish customs, and so that cultural difference was being seen here. And because of their widows were being overlooked in the daily serving of food. Okay, so I say it now or say it later. All right, well, let's just say it now. That herein lies the first problem of a quote unquote communist system, or a communeist, a commune, and that is that human nature is still present. And even though they were doing all these great things together and having all this fellowship together, there's still the problem of the fact that they are still human beings and they still have these cultural norms that they, may or may not be even aware of. But understand that in Jewish culture, overlooking widows is uh, a bit of it's more than just an average um, accusation here. This is a big deal. So we need to see that. Um, and what we'll see here is a leadership characteristic that I want to call out a little later on here. I just realized that there is something to this. So, but let's get on with this. So, verse 2, we made it through verse 1. Congratulations. Verse 2. So the 12, and that is that did be technically 11, but and one other, Matthias. So this is them, the disciples, called the disciples together and said, "It is not appropriate for us to neglect teaching the word of God in order to serve tables and manage the distribution of food." Now, catch here that they're not actually addressing the actual problem or the problem that was brought up. They're addressing the actual problem. Therefore, brothers, choose among you 7 men with good reputations, men of godly character and moral integrity, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we may put in charge of this task. Okay. I need to be doing some highlighting here. This one's really key. So is this. Now this is choose among you 7 men with good reputations. Okay. So we're seeing the first deacons being appointed basically here. So Maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. Verse 4. But we will continue to devote ourselves steadfastly to prayer and to the ministry of the word. So you have this group of disciples who have become the first ministers and elders in terms of the ministers of the word. But what they're doing here is they are appointing ministers of the other needs of the congregation here. And so they're appointing them. There's a lot here to unpack. Just bear with me. If you're in a hurry with this one, I am sorry. It's not going to be a hurried one here. This is going to be one that's going to take some time because we're seeing, again, my goal with this study is to look at leadership, and we are seeing a lot to unpack here. So the first thing to look at here is in verse 3, where it says, choose among you 7 men with good reputations. So they're looking for character. And those of you that are with me in the studies of Proverbs, you know that the Proverbs are all about godly character. That's what that is all about. Like, every single chapter, every single one points out bits of character that you should have. Every single one. And so what we're doing here is we're saying it's not just willingness. Somebody write that down. It's not just about willingness. It is about your character, integrity, and appointedness to this. So you need to be full of spirit and wisdom. So character and wisdom. In other words, we don't want just somebody who's eager. I yeah. I've faced this kind of thing in my own ventures, in my own business, and I've seen this even in the church, where we have somebody that's anxious to do stuff, and you ask them, "Okay, what kind of things are you passionate about? Where can I kind of fit you in, or whatever?" And they just say, "It doesn't matter, just whatever. I just want to do whatever." And that seems like a good thing for them to say, right? That they're willing to do anything. Willingness is good in and of itself, but understand that willingness is not a character. Willingness is not a character. Willingness is a motivation or an attitude, but there is humility in there, and that is a character. But understand that it's not just about the willingness; it's about being appropriate to appoint to that position. And these are people that would want to do this because they are full of that spirit, and they are put in charge of that task that has never been done before this way, but they're doing it. They're appointing that because they have that gift of the Spirit. Okay, and then they're feeling this direct call towards this, and they have a a lifetime built up of character that points them towards this. So it's not just the person who's willing. The person who's willing, they were probably thinking here, Judas was pretty willing, and we see what that ended up costing us, and costing him even. He was led astray by his willingness to do above and beyond and to administer the funds, that sort of thing. And so they were aware that they'd learned that lesson. And so by appointing people that are very specific and 7 among them, now I am not saying that 7 is like the magic number of the number of deacons you have in your church. I have seen that in churches before. It's kind of ridiculous to me, but it just happened to be 7. 7 is a number that comes up a lot. Just FYI, it is not uncommon. So again, this is something where we're seeing that play out here. Okay. Second thing is, but we will continue to verse 4 here. We will continue to devote ourselves to prayer and the ministry of the word. In other words, they're not um, saying they're not going to be doing anything. What they're saying is we want to do more of prayer and ministry of the word. Okay, so it's more of that is what they want to be doing, and not the administrative work. So one of the first leadership lessons that I had to learn in my career was actually this. It was that notion of I had to learn how to delegate appropriately, not just delegate, but delegate appropriately. And again, I've struggled with this even to this day. I still struggle with asking people to do things. I had the funny story about this is that I actually had an assistant in my business years ago that I was like, well, I really just need somebody to just watch over the books and follow up with emails and things like that that I severely dislike. Not my talents, not my gifting. There's nothing in that that is appealing to me. It is busy work that is just I wish it didn't have to be done at all, but it does need to happen. Now for her, it was something that was exciting. She was actually able to say, "Oh yeah, that'd be great," and she enjoyed that. Now it just if I was to ask her to say, what, I'll take care of the stuff I don't like. Can you just go ahead and write this book for me, and could you go ahead and get up on stage and give this talk for me? That would be ridiculous, right? But it's something where we have to recognize that from this beginnings here, that leadership meant being willing to delegate appropriately so that you can do more of what is in your area of talents and giftings. And so whatever that looks like in that particular case, I would argue that this is actually the ministry of the word. I think this was actually a gifting of the Spirit, not necessarily a talent that was developed. But in some cases, I think it was developed. It's just kind of it depends on which of the apostles we're talking about in this particular case. But nonetheless, it is something where they recognize that that is the mission. And if they are doing all the other stuff, there's only a certain finite amount of time that you can spend awake in a day. If you are doing all those other things, that takes away that time, takes away that energy. Meanwhile, you have other people that are just kind of not utilized. And so, from a kind of a worldly leadership perspective, what this means is that it is perfectly appropriate to have people on your team or employees or people that you work around that have different skill sets and different kind of things that they're doing. Paul says this, we're all one body with many different parts. That's the concept here. It's very much the same. So if you have leaders that are not willing to recognize that, then you've got a toxicity that's building up in your company because you don't have the ability to process properly. And so it really becomes a leadership skill and a necessary one to delegate like the apostles did here. Hope that's clear and useful. It's actually from leadership lessons, that has to be one of the single largest leadership lessons in the entire book of Acts, in my opinion, is that being willing to say, wait, why would we would be making ourselves responsible for all this? There's a value in that time. And if we can spread that value and spend more time, like these men are spending the time doing this, and we're spending the time doing this, all of a sudden we've multiplied. And we're not dividing time, now we're multiplying time. We're not dividing time, we're multiplying time. Not dividing time, multiplying. Get that through your head. I know I certainly need to as well, but it is often a challenge. Um, Give me just a second. Apologies. The phone thing, that was my fault. I scheduled or had something sent out that I shouldn't have. Yeah. So anyway, let's go on with the verse 5 here. The suggestion pleased the whole congregation, and they selected Stephen, a man full of faith in Christ Jesus, and filled with and led by the Holy Spirit. It's actually really cool. But Stephen, let's see this footnote here. These 7 men had Greek names, so they may have been Greek in ancestry, language, or way of life. However, Stephen, in his defense before the Sanhedrin, exhibited extensive knowledge of Jewish history. So that would be very interesting. I guess it'd be good to research that a little bit. Given what was said above, that there was the Hellenists were the ones making this complaint. So if there were, if some of these names were actually Greeks, well, here's one. So Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenius, and Nicholas, a proselyte, Gentile convert from Antioch. So yeah, so you've got a Greek, I guess you could say, from that regards. So that kind of makes it so that there's some evening out of who's doing the serving of food and that sort of thing right among them. So they brought these men before the apostles, and after praying, they laid their hands on them to dedicate and commission them for the service. So we see this as a action still to this day. We still have, when people are appointed as elders or deacons in the church, we see that. We also see some deacon ministries that are actually called Stephen's ministry and that sort of thing, that are dedicated to kind of going above and beyond, ministering to people, which is appropriate. And it's not just distributing food; it is ministering to the needs of people. And so, Stephen Ministry is actually one of the coolest intra-church organizations that I've ever seen. By the way, just saying, it is a well, and let me say this, because it's not just, again, one of those things where you just are willing and can be part of it. There is a process you have to go through to actually be a Stephen minister. And I find that highly appropriate. It's not just simply training, that you have to kind of prove your willingness and your giftedness towards this. I personally believe that we as humans have a certain level of compassion, and then beyond that is quite literally a spiritual gift. And Stephen's ministers really need to have above and beyond the normal level of compassion for human beings, because they are a lot more as asked of them in that kind of, I guess you could say, psychological care of the congregation. If you're not aware of it, that's something to look up after we're done here. We write that down and look that up. But I have a huge amount of respect for Stephen's ministers. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 7. So what's the results of this? And this is really key. It's not just theory. When I say these things, it's we're looking at over 2,000 years of proof that this works, right? And I say the 2,000 years just meaning just what we have right in front of us here. We've seen this work throughout the ages. And so verse 7 here, and the message of God kept on growing and spreading. And the number of disciples continued to increase greatly in Jerusalem, and a large number of the priests were becoming obedient to the faith. Do you hear that? A large number of the priests were becoming obedient to the faith, accepting Jesus as Messiah and acknowledging him as the source of eternal salvation. This is not a small thing, ladies and gentlemen. This is a huge transformation that's happening, which of course would further infuriate the all the members of the Sanhedrin, really, at that point. You've crossed over multiple boundaries. So everybody in the council is going to be upset about this, right? But That's exactly what happened. You have those that are actually believing, and seeking God fully, and they cannot ignore this, and they become obedient to the faith, accepting Jesus. It's a there are things that are beautiful, and then there are things that are very beautiful. To me, that is very beautiful. And it's mostly just when you see things that are overcoming obstinates, that's a big deal. That's a radical transformation, um, like the apostles had. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Stephen. Now Stephen, full of grace, that is divine blessing or favor, and power, was doing great wonders and signs, attesting miracles from among the people. So Stephen was doing these great things, right? However, some men from what was called the synagogue of the freedmen, freed Jewish slaves, interesting, both Syrians and Alexandrians, and some from Sicilia and the province of Asia, rose up and questioned and argued with Stephen. But they were not able to successfully withstand and cope with the wisdom and intelligence, the power of inspiration of the Spirit by whom he was speaking. That is just, I love that they were not successfully able to withstand and cope. That's next level right there. That that's pretty epic. But naturally, as human nature does reveal itself, then to attack him another way, they secretly instructed the men to say, "We heard this man Stephen speak blasphemous, that is, slanderous, sacrilegious, or abusive words against Moses and against God." In other words, they couldn't win, so they lied. Gosh, do we ever see that in today's world ever? No, surely this was something that only happened 2,000 years ago. Loud sigh. So these these synagogue of the freedmen provoked and incited the people, as well as the elders and scribes, and they came up to Stephen and seized him and brought him before the council, the Sanhedrin. They presented false witnesses who said, "This man never stopped speaking against this holy place and the law of Moses. For we have heard him say that this Jesus the Nazarene will tear down this place and change the traditions and customs which Moses handed down to us," which pretty obviously Stephen wouldn't have been saying. But they presented false witnesses. Understand the gravity of that. That there are in and I'm just going to go back to the book of Proverbs, even though it is in multiple different places. But in the things that God specifically despises, someone who bears false witness is listed there, right? So we know that this is not a small thing. That they had to be willing to, and if I recall correctly, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but if you're caught presenting false witnesses, you would be taken out and stoned, even in this day, and this and not today, but the day we're representing here. So this is a pretty big risk. They had obviously got people so whipped up into a frenzy here, and we don't really know what their motivation is fully, but it is enough for them to, whip people up into frenzy, willing to lie to the high council or high court about this. Verse 15, then all those who were sitting in the council stared intently at him, and they saw that Stephen's face was like the face of an angel. I almost hate to quit there. Don't you just want to read on? But we'll remain patient. Um, so this is I think this might be the shortest chapter of Acts, actually. But there's just there's just so much here. Um, don't miss the results. The results of solid leadership that is willing to um, acknowledge the boundaries of what can be done in a day, and being willing to bring others in service and trust them. But to do so, to trust them not foolishly or just because they're willing, but to trust them specifically because they are called, and they just have an undeniable calling to do this and a willingness, so they're willing to make that shift happen. But it is actually, it's again, the fourth thing here is that you're seeing humility in that leadership, right? You're seeing that this is something where they they continue themselves, they will devote themselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. Understand that's not a lightweight thing. They're not saying, we're going to stop distributing food so we can just do more of the preaching. This is hard to understand with people. And even after just doing this at my desk, sitting here talking, whatever I do one of these broadcasts like this, I need a moment afterwards. I have expended above average energy, way above average energy, actually, especially when I get to preaching. It is more than the average amount of energy. And so to to be that focused and be that, it may not seem like much to the average passerby, but I really do want you to understand that this is a very draining activity, even to those that are called and equipped for it. There is a literal sacrifice of the body that goes with this, and this is why most well-known speakers get paid a lot of money to do what they do, but it's only for that hour. And it seems like a lot per that hour. What you have to recognize is that it's not just that hour. It's all the ones that came before it and the energy of that moment. And it is a significant thing. My wife will tell you, I used to be a mobile disc jockey, and I would come home way above tab. Yes, I know. DJ the DJ. Yes, that was me. I had the website and everything. Yeah, the truth has been revealed. But I was so tired after any of those kind of events where, especially the ones that I put a lot into, the energy expended at the microphone is substantial. And so any of that, asking them to do other things in addition to that, you get to the point where it's just like, well, okay, I guess I'll just do this administrative stuff and hope there's something left over for the rest. And so it would make both, not as good as they could be. But by finding trustworthy people, and if you are in a leadership role or you're being put into one or you'd like to develop into one, this is a absolute necessary thing to learn. Um, I can't commit to a time frame. There is a lesson that I do intend to do with this. It's probably going to be more of a private thing. So I would encourage you to, if you're not getting my emails, they're pretty occasional, but if you're not on the email list, get on that. And so if you want to learn more about when I'm doing that study, um, you'll probably want to know about that. If you're either in a leadership position in your business or church, or you want to be in one, this is actually going to be really key. And it is all about recognizing people's talents and giftings, and you know making sure you're helping them track their time appropriately. So we're doing the most with our time, not just from a productivity standpoint, but from a value standpoint. If I'm spending like this morning, I spent a bunch of time going over our business and personal finances. And there's part of me that geeks out about it. about like putting things in a spreadsheet and seeing how we're doing and that kind of stuff like that, and trying not to freak out when it's not going well, or watching, oh yeah, good, I was able to hang in there for another month or whatever that looks like. There's a part of me that geeks out about the math and all that kind of stuff that goes into it, and making formulas and watching it work. But by and large, I don't enjoy it, and it's not really moving us forward at all. It's just, an accountability kind of a thing. It's like, okay, yes, we have, you know, the numbers are numbering or not numbering, as the case may be, but it doesn't really make more numbers by me doing that. That's not an activity that has actually taken away from the time that I could be generating more numbers. And so it is, so delegation and things like that is really necessary. But it's true even in your marriage. It's true even in a marriage where there has to be a division of tasks. Otherwise, that they're just either you're trying to do the same thing at the same time, which can sometimes cause a conflict, but it also can mean, a bit of a wasted potential there. There's certain things that I would agree that it's good for a couple to do together. That's good. Certain chores and whatnot that working together actually makes a lot of sense, and it's cool. How much faster can you do the dishes when you're working together? And how much more do you get out of that by doing it together? Yeah, but by doing it together, now all of a sudden you both have more time in your day than you would have if you did it alone, right? So it's a multiplicative thing with time, and so um, that's really important. And don't miss this. The people they selected, um, they have faith. They're led by the Spirit, right? This is not um, an assumed thing. They were led by the Spirit, and I think that kind of de facto means that they're led into this by the Spirit. And again, the results, and whether it be in your business or your marriage or your church, it causes growth and spreading. It causes the number to be increased. I would argue that it can't not. If it's appointed by God to do this, if you're not doing this just because you're selfish, which, um, yeah, I could ask everybody to raise their hands, and then tell me if I could see you, and I asked you if you've been in a situation where somebody was a supposed leader, but all they were doing was delegating things so they just didn't have to do it because just felt they were somehow entitled. I think everybody be raising their hands. They've all experienced this. We do have a bit of a leadership crisis in our country. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But by by living these principles and saying, we're spreading the spreading it out where people are actually gifted and talented, especially with the talents, by the way. Uh, these things that they're naturally born into, that can be a ministry in and of itself. If you have somebody that's working in your company and you are a their leader, I'm not saying their boss, I'm just saying their leader. There's a difference, by the way. Not all leaders are bosses, but hopefully all bosses are leaders. But that doesn't always happen. But if you are leading uh, a small team, for example, and you have the opportunity to build someone up by valuing them for the way they were born, for the things that come naturally to them. If you value those things instead of make them feel ashamed of it, you're helping them see the nature of Christ. So you can actually bring that out and say, yeah, yeah, you were literally born for this. You were created for this. You don't come by this by accident. You were created with this in mind. And so the more you live in those talents and amplify those talents, the more great things you're able to do. That's a ministry. That's a way to point them towards, hey, why is that? That's kind of weird. The world isn't telling me that. Why are you telling me that? What's up with that? The world's telling me to be ashamed of my, what comes naturally to me. That I am somehow, you know, and to check my privilege because that comes naturally to me. This is literally a thing, by the way. This is something I've heard, you know, and shame on whoever says these things. Um, Calling someone out because they're naturally talented and gifted by God to do something, and calling that they're somehow privileged, and they need to check their privilege. It's completely bogus, and that's blaspheming the Holy Spirit. Frankly, it needs to stop. If it's in your church, you need to speak out against it. That there's no lie. You know, if that is happening, you need to actually, stamp that out. Call Satan for what he is. Seriously, if you're not in a position where you can amplify other people's talents and bring out their giftings as being gifts of the Spirit, then you're in the wrong place, and you either need to leave or call them to account for the Spirit. In all seriousness, and yeah, again, the odds to the sorry the desire to read forward on this right away is pretty heavy because seeing Stephen's defense is just brilliant. But we need to understand what was against them, and so that's the second part of this is that um, leadership is and serving people is exactly what Satan does not want. It's exactly what Satan doesn't want. And so if you are in those positions, you need to be aware that the attacks are coming. They absolutely are coming. And Satan will throw everything he possibly can at disrupting you in that role. If you're listen to me, hear me. Stop the distractions. Let me have your eyes. If you are feeling these attacks by Satan, it means you're in the right place. Also, you are being equipped for that. You are being equipped for these challenges by the Holy Spirit. That same power that raised Christ from the dead lives within you. And if you're feeling these attacks and you're feeling like you're being, called out and you have false witnesses speaking against you, it's time to live by that spirit, by that same power. That's where you need to be. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to close with that. I hope that's a powerful message to you and something that will empower you today to live in that same spirit. All right. Love you guys. Again, see you tomorrow for another exciting message from the Acts. Um, I did have to change out my time tomorrow, so we'll be actually 11 a.m. Central Time tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central Time Thursday, and again at 11 on Friday. I know it's a little crazy, and but I do appreciate you all being here, um, live or after the fact, doesn't matter. I do appreciate that you've taken the time, and I do hope that you are blessed by the best. And then go, 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 go. Be a blessing to all the rest. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.